It's wonderful to build a business and start seeing the fruits of your efforts until you see somebody else use your photos, captions, even slogan and logo. So what do you do about it? So in today's video, we're talking intellectual property. I'm interviewing Céleste Reumert, who is an intellectual property specialist. She's going to be sharing with us 5 tips to legally protect your business. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already and hit the bell button to be notified on future videos. Celeste, welcome to today's show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So in today's episode, we're going to learn about the 5 steps to protect your business in a legal way, right? The legal things to do to protect your business. And Celeste is going to share with us the tips. So what's the number one thing that people should do to protect their businesses?
The number one thing to do is to realize that they do have intellectual property. Because intellectual property is anything that you create. So let's say, for instance, you have written a book about what it is that you do, or you've written an article, or if you're a songwriter, you've written the lyrics to a song. That is automatically protected by copyright law. And some countries will say that you have to also register your copyright. That is not necessary. The thing is, you put the copyright sign onto your thing, and then you have a clause saying that this is protected by intellectual property rights. Or copyright.
So you don't have to register anything. You just put copyrighted.
Well, on the copyrighted thing, you can in some countries register it, but it's not necessary. And it does not necessarily give you a better form of protection. It will give you an expense, so to speak. So if you are wanting to protect yourself, don't necessarily think that you have to protect something that can be protected by copyrights. Something else that you can do, when you've created a business, like mine, for instance, I give legal advice regarding copyrights and trademarks. And I created some of my own trademark, but had somebody help me sort of give it the final look. And then I registered it as a trademark. And the trademark is a much stronger form of protection than the copyright is. And let me explain why. Because copyright is protected for your entire life plus 70 years after your death. So that's quite a while. But the trademark is actually something that can be protected eternally as long as there are certain criteria that are upheld. It is important.
Can you just give us an example? For example, like copyright. If I write a text on my website and I put copyrights on it, then nobody can use these same words, right?
Yeah.
The sequence of the words.
What's also important to know about the copyright is that if it's something that's been copied from another piece of work, then it can't be protected. It has to have your thumbprint on it. It has to be your expression, your unique way of expressing yourself.
But it's not about the idea. It's about the way we say things, we express them, right? Yeah. I mean, how would you define that somebody actually stole your material when it comes to copywriting?
You recognize your own way of writing. Trust me, I have seen so many people, even on LinkedIn, you see people who say that, oh, my work has been copied and posted over here, and they didn't say where they got it from, and, and some people seem to think that there's nothing to do about it. And that is so not true, because you can protect yourself. And that is completely vital. When you have a business, you want to protect your hard work. Because if you don't, and this is tip number 2, somebody else is going to steal it. And what are you left with? Shattered dreams and a shattered life. You cannot proceed if all your content is stolen. I mean, you can pick up the pieces again and you can hopefully go, but it's a much better idea to protect it up front so that you don't experience the devastation. I have heard of so many people being completely devastated because of somebody stealing their work, and trust me, it can be helped. When you realize that you have these rights, it is important to contact somebody who can help you, because of so many people having stolen their work and thinking that there's nothing to do, which is untrue. Okay, it's not true that nothing can be done, because things can be done. So once you have your protection in place, you can take legal action. And if you don't want to do it yourself, which I totally understand, because it can be overwhelming having to contact a person infringing upon your rights, you're thinking, goodness me, just leave the bloody work alone and don't infringe upon my rights. Why am I even to contact this person? If you can't sort of go there, if you want to keep your focus on what it is that you do best, you can contact somebody like me. It doesn't have to be me, but it can be me, and say, look, somebody's infringing upon my rights. Can you help? Can you stop them? And then I will ask you to furnish me with a certain amount of information so that I can make my assessment of the case, so that I can see what is to be done. And if it's a clear-cut case, I will contact the other person saying, listen, you are actually infringing upon my client's rights. This is a cease and desist request. Depending upon the type of infringement, if you have told me the monetary damage it has done to you, I can put that claim to that person so that you get money back.
Right. I suppose it's easy when it comes to like an image or a photo, but I just find it very difficult when it comes to like a text or like copy. No?
Yep.
No, you as a lawyer,
you will always be able to recognize the way you express yourself. Okay. And you will always be able to say, that is my work. Don't do that. And so many people have experienced it. And even somebody I've known for quite a while was asked to do some training for corporates, and the corporate wanted them to put their material at their employees' availability, and this person didn't really want to do that because they were afraid, because they have experienced that people have stolen their work before. So they asked me, what am I to do in this situation? And I said, well, if you feel unsafe putting it up to everybody, for everybody to see and use, don't do it. But at least if you do it, put a clause on it saying this is protected by copyright legislation, and it's my work, and it's you can't use any bits of it, so to speak. You know, I'm trying to say this as easily as possible so that people get an idea of how they can put this into practice themselves, because it doesn't have to be me doing it for them. They can find somebody else. That's totally fine, you know. The important thing is to actually know and trust that something can be done.
Right. Okay, so there is always an option. Now, when it comes to like websites and the internet in general, if you don't put copyright and then you can edit it later, how does it work, like legally? Like if someone thinks that a text or a copy has been stolen, but at that point he didn't have like copyrighted and protection like written down, and then he can just add it later, in your perspective, I mean,
I think that is one of the first things that should be put in place at the bottom of your website. You know, there's always a banner at the bottom, or where it says, you know, here is my terms and condition, here is my GDPR compliancy, and you know, all that information at the bottom of each website. And that sort of follows through all the pages. So if you have a clause at the bottom of that saying all the content here is protected. So many people think that whatever is up on the website is free for them to
to use,
harvest, so to speak, and use as they so see fit. But that is so not true. And intellectual property rights is something, it's not going to go away. It's something that is going to expand, because there comes more and more and more types of intellectual property. You know, you can have a sound recording, you can have a film. There are so many things, and there's no reason not to protect it. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard of the film Tootsie with Dustin Hoffman in it.
No, I don't think so.
No, it's
sure. Of course I have.
Yeah, it's a classic film, and a really brilliant film where it shows him as an actor not being able to find work, so he disguises himself as a woman, basically speaking. And there was a very prominent picture where he's wearing a red sequin dress, and I think the American flag was behind him, and at one stage this picture was digitally altered. It was still his head, and it was the body of another person, still a male model with the same body type as him, wearing a different dress and different shoes. This picture was placed inside a magazine. And he, of course, felt really upset and misrepresented, and all of those feelings that bubble up inside you when you see that somebody has done something without your consent. And so he took the matter to court, and in the first instance he was found to be in the right. But then, unfortunately, the case was brought in front of a second tribunal, and they found that he was in the wrong because the image was inside the magazine and not used to sell the magazine, so it wasn't for commercial use. They refer to it as non-commercial speech in the US. That's how they classify it. They also have a clause that's called fair use, and so when people do something within that realm, they are not infringing upon the other person's rights. So he had been awarded a monetary recompensation, but he was to pay that back plus pay for the legal fees. So yeah,
interesting.
it's really, really a good idea to know what it is that you're doing, and also to protect yourself. And I feel that it was too bad that he lost that case, so to speak, because he felt his rights infringed. I mean, his face is so easily recognizable, and that whole picture, the way that it was set up was easily recognizable, you know. So of course he felt infringed upon. But because
sorry, go ahead.
Because of the legislation in the US, that was how that case fell out. What were you going to say?
I was going to ask you whether the laws, the intellectual property laws, are all the same. Are they universal?
More or less universal, which makes it easier for somebody like me. There are tweaks in each country, but overall it's the same, because that makes it easier when things cross borders and stuff like that. If the situation isn't as dire as a court case would require, I would suggest trying to solve it outside the courtroom. It's less expensive, it takes less time. If you can just come to an agreement. If you have to have mediation, that can take equally as long as a lawsuit. The best thing is to try to solve it without either a mediation or a court case. That is the fifth advice.
So I have, for example, a brand that I have trademarked like many years ago.
Well done.
Yeah, but I actually don't know if there's anything that's been reproduced, because I'm not so close to observing like what's going on, if anybody's using that logo or is similar to that logo. Are there any tools that can help us actually see whether other brands are being created using your own signs or the name of the company or the brand?
Yes, I would suggest that either you use Google. Google is a really good tool to search things up.
Okay.
Google can help you a lot. But if that isn't enough, that may not be enough actually. So you can actually use the different search engines, and if that is too much of a task for you, because it can seem overwhelming, you can contact a legal professional such as myself to say, look, I would very much like to have a search done. Can you do this possibly for me? And then the person will have to consider the amount of time and all that to put together a price or an investment for you to say, okay, this is how much it's going to be. So is this something you want to move forward with? That's how I work. And another thing, I've given more than 5 pieces of advice.
The bonus ones.
Lost completely track. But another thing is, if you are looking to take on investors, if you haven't protected your intellectual property rights, they may do a hostile takeover.
Oh, that's a very good one, actually, because a lot of times when I'm in meetings, I'm like, how much should I give away? How much should I talk about in my project? And there's always this fear inside that.
Don't you have NDA agreements?
Sorry?
Don't you have NDA agreements?
No, I mean, like when it, no, what I mean, can you explain to that?
NDA is short for non-disclosure agreements.
Mm-hmm.
Non-disclosure agreements is something you have for business meetings when you are to take on, for instance, investors, or if you want to hire somebody, you want to make sure that the person doesn't leave the meeting doing what you do afterwards immediately. Mm-hmm. So the non-disclosure agreement tells them, hands off, this is mine. And since you have a trademark, you put that onto that piece of paper as well. Mm-hmm. And you have a copyright clause on it as well. So you put as much into action as you possibly can.
Right.
Does that make sense?
As you can guess, us as entrepreneurs, we get excited by the idea, the project, that we actually forget about protecting and all the admin work. I mean, I have to be honest with you, I've been doing business for more than 10 years, and anything admin or legal is really my weakness, given that I have a master's in law, which is kind of funny. But you're right. So yeah, there need to be contracts that are written. You need to have probably a lawyer is going to work on your contracts. So that's a very substantial investment, especially for startups. I mean, what do you recommend for, because my audience is mainly young entrepreneurs who are just starting out. What do you recommend to those people who are starting out, but also they want to make sure they're protecting their businesses?
Well, I suggest that if they can't seek legal advice from somebody like me or a solicitor, I suggest that they find somebody who does templates. A lot of people do templates these days, and that can be a very good starting point. There are so many ways to look out for yourself and to make sure that your rights aren't infringed upon. And I strongly recommend protecting what you've got, and to use the copyright clause is a really good way of starting out, because that doesn't have to be very expensive.
Okay, well, that's a very good one, Celeste, today, because it actually is giving me ideas, and I'm starting to think that maybe I should look back into my business and start seeing in what ways I can actually protect it. So thank you so much for all these tips today. Where can we find you?
Well, I'm easily found. I'm easily found on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. I'm easily found on Facebook. On LinkedIn, it's just my personal name, Céleste Reumert Refn. which is really, really difficult to say for anybody who's not Danish.
I will put down the links in the description box.
And my website is grandipr.dk.
Thank you, Celeste, for your time. And then you guys should go check out Celeste's website. And then if you need any legal advice or legal counseling, definitely get in touch with her.